My beloved child, before your thoughts carry you somewhere else, remain here for just a little while. There are moments that arrive without making a sound, yet they quietly reshape everything that follows. This is one of those moments. Don't skip, because what is unfolding is not loud enough to demand your attention, but it is meaningful enough to deserve it. Somewhere beyond what your eyes can see, a quiet story has already begun moving toward you, and today you are not hearing the ending. You are stepping into the very first page. Have you ever wondered why certain moments feel strangely familiar, as though your heart recognizes something your mind cannot explain? There is a reason some encounters leave an impression long before words are spoken. Truth has a way of traveling ahead of people. Long before two lives truly meet, honesty begins building a bridge that neither person realizes is being formed. That bridge cannot be built with appearances, impressive words, or carefully prepared conversations. It grows only through the small choices that no one applauds and the quiet decisions made when nobody seems to be watching. What happened recently was not dramatic. It was not designed to embarrass you or place obstacles in your way. Instead, an unseen opportunity appeared, simple enough to overlook, ordinary enough to dismiss. Yet hidden inside that ordinary moment was something extraordinary. Someone connected to your future paid attention, not because they wanted perfection, but because they were searching for something becoming increasingly rare. They were searching for sincerity. Stay till the end, because this part of the story cannot be understood by rushing through it. They never expected flawless answers. They never expected someone who had every detail figured out. They simply hoped that somewhere in this world there still existed a person whose heart remained the same whether anyone noticed or not. That hope had become fragile after disappointment, misunderstanding, and watching too many people wear beautiful masks while hiding empty intentions beneath them. Then your path quietly crossed theirs. Not with fireworks. Not with grand promises. Not with dramatic declarations. Just through an ordinary moment that carried an extraordinary truth. Perhaps you believed nobody noticed your kindness. Perhaps you thought your honesty disappeared into silence without changing anything. But sincerity leaves traces that words cannot erase. Even when no applause follows, even when no one immediately responds, it continues speaking in ways beyond your awareness. There was one particular detail that stayed with them. It was not what you achieved. It was not what you owned. It was not even what you said. It was why you chose to say it. That difference changed everything. Many people know how to create the right impression. Far fewer know how to remain genuine when there is nothing to gain. Without realizing it, you revealed something impossible to imitate for very long, a peaceful consistency between your words and your character. They noticed. At first, they questioned themselves. Could someone really be this authentic? The question remained with them longer than expected. Days passed. Small memories returned. Simple conversations replayed inside their thoughts. Details they almost ignored suddenly became impossible to forget. Every memory pointed toward the same realization. This person never tried to become someone else just to be accepted. That realization reached much deeper than they imagined. Something important is waiting for you, because this is where the story quietly changes direction. People often believe trust begins after love. Sometimes it begins long before love fully understands itself. Sometimes trust quietly opens the door, and love simply follows behind. As they reflected on every small interaction, something unexpected happened inside them. The walls they had carefully built over time began becoming heavier than the openness they had spent so long avoiding. Protecting themselves had once felt safe. Now it simply felt lonely. For the first time in a long while, they wondered whether hope deserved another chance. Not because someone convinced them. Not because circumstances became perfect. But because honesty has a gentle strength that keeps speaking even after conversations end. They found themselves smiling at memories they never expected to revisit. Then they became emotional for a reason they could barely explain. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't regret. It was relief. The kind of relief someone experiences after believing goodness had disappeared, only to unexpectedly discover that it had quietly survived all along. Tears are often misunderstood. Sometimes tears appear not because something has been lost, but because something beautiful has finally been found. That moment surprised them. They paused. They sat with their thoughts. And without anyone around to notice, emotion quietly filled the silence. Not because they suddenly understood everything. But because they realized they no longer had to keep expecting disappointment from every new connection. That realization softened something inside them they believed would remain guarded forever. Meanwhile, you continued living your days, unaware that your ordinary choices had already become extraordinary in someone else's heart. This is why small acts should never be underestimated. A gentle response. A truthful answer. A patient decision. A quiet kindness. These moments rarely announce their importance while they are happening. Only later do people realize they changed everything. Perhaps you have questioned whether remaining genuine still matters in a world that often rewards appearances first. Hear this carefully. Authenticity may not always receive immediate recognition. But when it reaches the right heart, it becomes unforgettable. The story has not reached its destination yet. In fact, it has only begun unfolding. Because what they discovered about your honesty was only the first piece of something much larger, something neither of you fully understands yet. And the next quiet revelation is already drawing closer. The quietest moments often carry the greatest meaning, and this is one of them. What happened after that realization was even more unexpected than the discovery itself. They tried to convince themselves they were simply overthinking everything. They told themselves that one honest moment could not possibly change the way they viewed another person. Yet every time they attempted to move on with their day, another memory gently returned, asking them to look again. Don't skip, because this is where the hidden story begins revealing its true direction. They replayed conversations that once seemed ordinary. Suddenly, every sentence sounded different. They noticed how you never exaggerated to impress anyone. You never chased attention with loud promises. Even your silence carried sincerity. That was the part they could not ignore. In a world where people often tried to become whoever others wanted them to be, you remained quietly yourself. That simple truth became impossible for them to forget. Something inside them whispered, maybe this is the person I've been hoping still exists. That single thought stayed longer than they expected. It followed them into peaceful mornings. It remained with them during busy afternoons. It appeared again when the world around them finally became quiet. No matter how much they distracted themselves, your honesty continued returning, not as pressure, but as peace. Stay till the end, because another realization is waiting just ahead. They remembered a small detail that almost disappeared from memory. You had every opportunity to take the easier path, yet you chose the truthful one instead. No audience watched. No reward was guaranteed. No recognition followed. Yet you still made the same choice. That moment became the answer to a question they had carried in their heart for a very long time. They had always wondered if genuine character still existed beyond appearances. Without knowing it, you answered that question. That answer touched something much deeper than admiration. It awakened trust. Trust does not arrive all at once. It grows quietly, almost invisibly, until one day it becomes impossible to deny. That is exactly what was happening. They were not falling for perfect words. They were learning to believe in consistent actions. For the first time in a long while, they stopped expecting disappointment before giving someone a chance. That change was bigger than either of you realized. There was one evening when everything became especially clear. They found themselves smiling without any obvious reason. Then, almost immediately afterward, emotion filled their eyes again. They weren't crying because they felt weak. They were overwhelmed by the rare comfort of realizing they no longer had to question every person's intentions. Hope had quietly returned. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to remind them that kindness had not disappeared from the world. Something important is waiting for you, because their next decision surprised even themselves. Instead of pulling away, they became curious. Instead of creating distance, they started paying closer attention. Not to judge you. Not to test you again. But simply to understand the heart behind the honesty they had witnessed. The more they observed, the more every small detail pointed in the same direction. Your patience was real. Your compassion was natural. Your integrity remained steady whether anyone noticed or not. Little by little, the picture became complete. And with every new piece, their respect grew stronger. They quietly admitted something they had never spoken aloud. If someone can remain this genuine when no one is watching, maybe they're someone I can truly trust. Those words changed everything inside them. From that day forward, they no longer looked at you through uncertainty. They looked at you through possibility. The future suddenly felt different. Not because every answer had appeared, but because the right foundation had finally been discovered. Sometimes life does not begin changing with extraordinary events. Sometimes it changes the moment one sincere heart recognizes another. You may still be wondering why your ordinary choices mattered so much. The answer is beautifully simple. Honesty has a quiet light. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't compete for recognition. It simply shines wherever it goes. And anyone searching for something real will eventually notice it. This story is still unfolding. The tears you never saw were only the beginning. What happened after they accepted the truth about your heart opened a completely new chapter, one that neither of you expected, and one that is drawing closer with every passing day. There comes a moment when a person stops searching for more evidence because their heart has already recognized what their mind is still trying to explain. That moment arrived quietly, without anyone announcing it, and without either of you realizing how important it would become. Don't skip. Because the next few moments reveal why one honest heart can change another forever. They stopped asking themselves whether your honesty was real. Instead, they began asking a completely different question. What would life feel like if someone like this remained in my future? That question stayed with them longer than they expected. It followed them through ordinary routines. It appeared while they looked out a window. It returned during quiet evenings when everything else became still. No matter where their thoughts wandered, they always found themselves returning to the same place, you. Not because you demanded attention. Not because you tried to stand out. But because peace has a way of becoming unforgettable once someone has lived without it for too long. They started noticing something they had never noticed before. Whenever they thought about people from the past, they felt tired. Whenever they thought about you, they felt calm. That difference seemed small at first. Then it became impossible to ignore. For years they had mistaken excitement for connection. Now they were discovering that genuine connection often feels much quieter. It feels safe. It feels steady. It feels like finally putting down a weight you didn't even realize you had been carrying. Stay till the end, because something meaningful is slowly coming into focus. There was one memory they could not stop revisiting. It wasn't a dramatic conversation. It wasn't a life-changing event. It was simply the way you responded when there was every reason to choose convenience over honesty. Most people would never remember such a small moment. Yet that single choice became the foundation for everything they believed about you. They realized that character is revealed in ordinary situations far more than extraordinary ones. That understanding touched them deeply. They smiled. Then they became quiet again. Because they suddenly understood why meeting certain people changes the direction of an entire season of life. Not because those people are perfect, but because they remind us that goodness still exists. Something important is waiting for you. Without realizing it, they began protecting the image they held of you. Whenever someone spoke carelessly, they refused to make quick judgments. Whenever doubt appeared, they remembered what they had already witnessed. Whenever uncertainty tried to return, your honesty answered it before it could grow. For the first time in a long while, trust felt stronger than fear. That was completely new for them. Their hearts slowly began opening doors that had remained closed for longer than anyone knew. Not all at once. Not dramatically. One quiet step at a time. Meanwhile, your own journey continued. Perhaps you wondered whether staying true to yourself was worth it. Perhaps you questioned whether anyone truly noticed the quiet decisions you made every day. The answer had already begun unfolding, even though you could not yet see it. Every sincere action was becoming another reason for someone to believe again. Every truthful choice was writing another line in a story that neither of you could fully read yet. Sometimes the greatest influence we have on another person's life happens without our knowledge. Sometimes simply remaining authentic gives another person permission to believe in authenticity again. That is exactly what was happening. Their heart was changing. Not through pressure. Not through promises. But through quiet evidence collected one ordinary moment at a time. Then another realization gently appeared. What if honesty isn't just something this person does? What if honesty is simply who they are? That thought stayed with them. The difference between doing something honest and becoming an honest person suddenly became clear. One can be copied. The other can only be lived. They finally understood why your presence felt different from everyone else they had known. You were not trying to convince anyone. You were simply being yourself. And somehow, that became more powerful than any carefully prepared impression ever could. They looked ahead instead of behind. They stopped comparing. They stopped expecting disappointment before hope had a chance to breathe. A peaceful confidence slowly replaced old uncertainty. The future no longer felt like something to fear. It began feeling like something worth patiently waiting for. Don't skip, because the next chapter reveals the quiet decision they made after fully accepting what your honesty had shown them, a decision that neither you nor they expected, yet one that will gently reshape everything that follows. Sometimes the most important decision a person ever makes is one they never announce. There are no speeches. No celebrations. No one applauds the moment it happens. Yet from that quiet decision, an entirely different future begins to grow. This is where that unseen moment arrived. Stay till the end, because what happened next was not about proving your honesty anymore. It was about deciding what to do with the truth they had finally accepted. For a long time, they believed protecting their heart meant expecting the worst from everyone. They had convinced themselves that caution was wisdom and distance was strength. It felt safer that way. If no one came close enough, no one could disappoint them. Then they remembered you. The memory interrupted everything they had taught themselves. Because every time they tried to place you beside the people who had hurt them before, something didn't fit. The comparison simply refused to stay. Your actions kept separating themselves from every old memory. Your words remained consistent. Your kindness never asked for recognition. Your honesty stayed the same whether life was easy or complicated. Slowly, they stopped comparing you to the past. Instead, they began imagining you as part of the future. That single shift changed more than they realized. Don't skip. Because this quiet realization became the beginning of a completely different chapter. One evening, they found themselves sitting in complete silence. No music. No distractions. Just their thoughts. For the first time, they allowed themselves to ask a question they had avoided for a very long time. What if I've already met someone worth trusting? The question lingered. It didn't rush them. It simply waited. The more they reflected, the clearer everything became. Trust had not appeared overnight. It had been quietly growing every time you chose sincerity over convenience. Every truthful conversation. Every patient response. Every ordinary act of kindness. They all became small pieces of one beautiful picture. And now the picture was finally complete. Something important is waiting for you. As that understanding settled into their heart, another feeling quietly followed. Gratitude. Not because life had suddenly become perfect. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared. But because they realized genuine people still exist. They smiled through quiet emotion. Not because they were overwhelmed by sadness. But because hope had returned without asking permission. Hope often arrives gently. It doesn't knock loudly. It simply sits beside a tired heart until that heart remembers how to believe again. That is exactly what happened. Without realizing it, you became part of that healing. Meanwhile, you continued living your own life, unaware that someone was carrying your honesty as a reminder that goodness had not disappeared from the world. Perhaps there were days when you wondered if choosing integrity was worth the effort. Perhaps you questioned whether doing the right thing even mattered when nobody seemed to notice. If only you could have seen what your quiet choices were accomplishing beyond your own view. They had started changing. The fear that once spoke first became quieter. The doubt that once controlled every decision became smaller. Peace slowly became louder than uncertainty. Stay till the end. Because one final realization was still waiting. They eventually understood something they had never understood before. Real trust is not built through extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary moments repeated with extraordinary consistency. That thought remained with them. And once they accepted it, everything felt different. They no longer searched for hidden motives in every conversation. They no longer expected every kind word to disappear tomorrow. Instead, they allowed themselves to believe that some people truly mean what they say. That belief felt unfamiliar. But it also felt right. Then, almost without noticing, they made a promise inside their own heart. A quiet promise. One that nobody else heard. If this person's heart remains as genuine as everything I've seen so far, I won't let fear make my decisions anymore. No one celebrated that promise. No one witnessed it. Yet it became one of the most meaningful moments of their journey. Because from that point forward, they stopped running from possibility. They began walking toward it. Every passing day strengthened what they already knew. Not because something dramatic happened, but because your character never changed. Consistency became the loudest message you could have ever shared. And that message reached deeper than words ever could. What they once believed was only admiration quietly transformed into something far more meaningful. Respect became trust. Trust became peace. Peace slowly began making room for a future they had never dared to imagine before. The story, however, is far from over. Because after making that silent promise, they found themselves standing before one final question they could no longer avoid. It was a question that would shape every step they chose from that moment forward. And the answer they discovered would become the most heartfelt part of this entire journey. There are moments when the heart can no longer remain silent. It has gathered too many memories, too many quiet realizations, and too many small pieces of truth to pretend that nothing has changed. This was one of those moments. It did not arrive with noise. It arrived with peace. Don't skip. Because the next step in this journey was not about discovering your honesty anymore. It was about discovering what that honesty had awakened inside them. For days, they carried one question wherever they went. Not because they were confused, but because the answer mattered more than they were ready to admit. What if this person has already changed my life without even knowing it? The thought seemed impossible at first. How could someone create such a deep impact without making grand promises? How could someone leave such a lasting impression simply by being genuine? The more they reflected, the more they realized the answer had been quietly growing all along. It wasn't one conversation. It wasn't one unforgettable moment. It was the consistency. Every time they remembered you, they remembered the same person. There were no different versions. No hidden masks. No need to wonder which side of you was real. Your honesty had become predictable in the most beautiful way. And suddenly they understood something that had taken years to learn. The safest people are often the quietest ones. The strongest hearts are rarely the loudest. The most meaningful connections are usually built through countless ordinary moments that almost nobody notices. Stay till the end. Because one quiet realization changed everything they believed about the future. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened, they stopped asking whether you could be trusted. Instead, they asked themselves something completely different. Am I ready to trust again? The room became silent. Not because there was nothing to think about, but because the answer was already waiting inside them. They had been protecting themselves for so long that they forgot what hope felt like. Then your honesty reminded them. Hope isn't something we force. It quietly returns when we finally meet someone who gives it a reason to stay. That realization brought tears to their eyes once again. Not tears of pain. Not tears of regret. But the quiet emotion that comes when a heart realizes it no longer has to carry yesterday's fears into tomorrow. Something important is waiting for you. Without telling anyone, they began making small changes. They became more patient. More open. More willing to believe the best before expecting the worst. People around them noticed they seemed different. Calmer. Lighter. More at peace. No one knew why. No one knew that the reason was connected to a simple truth they had discovered through you. Sometimes one honest person quietly reminds another person who they were always meant to become. You never asked them to change. You never tried to convince them. You simply lived with integrity. And somehow, that became the lesson they needed most. Meanwhile, your own story continued moving forward. Perhaps there were moments when you questioned whether your quiet kindness made any difference. Perhaps you wondered if choosing honesty was worth it when shortcuts seemed easier. If only you could have seen what was happening beyond your own view. Every sincere decision became another reason for someone to believe that genuine connection was still possible. Every truthful word became another brick in a foundation neither of you realized was being built. Don't skip. Because one final moment remained. One morning, they found themselves smiling before the day had even begun. There was no special occasion. Nothing extraordinary had happened overnight. Yet their heart felt different. Lighter. More hopeful. More certain. They realized they were no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Instead, they quietly looked forward to it. That surprised them more than anything else. Because for the first time in a very long while, the future no longer felt uncertain. It felt full of possibility. And deep within that peaceful feeling, they finally admitted something they had been trying to hide from themselves. You didn't just show me what honesty looks like. You reminded me that love grows strongest where trust already lives. Those words remained unspoken. Yet they echoed through every quiet corner of their heart. From that moment on, they no longer wondered whether your honesty was real. They simply became grateful that they had recognized it before walking away. The journey has not reached its ending. In fact, its most meaningful chapter is only beginning. Because after accepting this truth, they quietly made one heartfelt decision, one that neither of you could have predicted, yet one that would gently bring your two paths closer than ever before.